Story 1. This is not my story, but I received permission to post it from the person who experienced the pro revenge. Dave, not his real name, had been working for an information technology programming company for just over 9 years. He had built a good reputation as a hard worker, and all his colleagues knew they could trust him to be a big help during difficult times, such as when working on large, complex projects for major clients. Dave's manager, John, was planning to retire and thought Dave would be a good replacement. John put Dave's name forward as a recommendation and started showing him the ropes of his potential new job, just to give him a glimpse of what he might be asked to undertake. A month later, John submitted his notice of retirement, and Dave's department manager, Michael, began the interview process. Some character information. While John was a good manager and very people-friendly, Michael was not. All Michael cared about were numbers and reports. He didn't even know who most of his staff were, nor did he have much interaction with them. Michael had started the interviews to fill John's position, with Dave being one of the interviewees. Dave thought the interview went really well. A few nervous months later, Michael announced the new manager. It was an outside hire, not an internal promotion. Dave was disappointed but brushed it off, thinking, there is always someone better for the job. However, in less than a week, he realized just how wrong he was. The new manager, Darren, was incompetent. He didn't know how to spell computer program, let alone write one. It turned out he was old friends with Michael, and Michael had helped him fabricate his resume to get the job. The news quickly spread to all the programmers, but there was nothing they could do, as Michael was the person all complaints had to go through, and he buried all of them. As a result, no one above Michael knew of Darren's incompetence. From day one, Darren had been pushing all his work onto others and then claiming credit for their work, receiving bonuses he didn't deserve. He spent his days watching movies, napping, playing games, and occasionally pretending to be a manager when the need arose, but he never wrote a single line of code. After 3 months of this, the extra workload was starting to affect Dave and others. Talking to Michael would do nothing, so Dave devised a plan to address the situation. Time for the pro revenge. Dave had talked with all the other programmers and agreed that the next time Darren pushed a major project onto them, they would purposely sabotage the work. Not in a big way, just enough to cause some bugs and glitches that would really put pressure on Michael and Darren. It took about another month, but a really big project came in. Immediately, Darren started pushing his work onto others and stealing credit, so the plan was put into action. It was easy to accomplish, especially as Darren had no clue about coding, and Michael didn't care as long as the project was completed in good time. The project was finished, saved, and sent to the client, with almost all of the major work credit being stolen by Darren. It took less than 2 days for the client to call back, complaining about how the new program had damaged his systems and was causing havoc in his company. The client wanted it fixed and a full refund. The bosses were angry at Michael, and he tried to shift the blame onto Darren. Then Darren tried to shift the blame onto the programmers, so Dave and the programmers simply pointed out that the program wasn't their project and denied any involvement in its development, which brought the attention back to Darren. The fallout with the bosses came down hard on Darren for what happened, and he confessed that he had lied on his resume. He also revealed that Michael had helped him fabricate it. Dave and the programmers denied any wrongdoing on their side in the project, just stating that Darren must have damaged the program somehow. Michael and Darren were promptly fired and replaced. Dave and the rest fixed the errors that Darren had created, and the client was satisfied. In the end, Dave didn't get the promotion but left the company a year later for a better job. Story 2. I worked as a security guard for a standard security company, but we were contracted with a petrochemical company to provide security at their world headquarters. The company is a Fortune 500 company making billions of dollars a year. Therefore, the account we had meant that we handled security for all of their locations inside the United States, while other companies handled sites outside the country. This account was worth around $30 million per year. I joined the company in March, and things seemed great. My shift was very manageable, 10:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m., Monday to Friday. I spent most of my day doing paperwork and signing in other contractors and delivery drivers. Honestly, it felt like a pretty decent job. It didn't pay very well, but you can't complain when you sit on your backside all day. However, we soon began to have a staffing problem. People were leaving and getting fired too quickly. We were supposed to have about 15 guards, but we got as low as 9. This does not include the 3 veteran guards employed by the client company, as they were separate from us. This is very important later. This caused horrible schedules. In a 26-hour period, I worked 20 hours, which I later found out is illegal in our state, and we would easily put in 60-hour weeks. Every single guard was working overtime. It caused havoc with our personal lives. My girlfriend even told me she was thinking about leaving me because, out of the entire week, I would see her maybe an hour a day before I fell asleep, and we lived together. So obviously, some compensation was required. Overtime was decent pay, yes, but we wanted an overall raise. We got paid far too little to be working 70-hour weeks with 12 16-hour shifts. Each facility has a supervisor through the contractor company, and each set of facilities has a branch manager who supervises specific accounts for the regional manager. While the branch manager was supposed to visit each facility once a month, there are 3 facilities in his area on the account. I saw him twice in my 1-year period with the company. Apparently, the client company had a lot of influence in the state, so the security company was basically their subordinate, and they tried to keep their distance as much as legally allowed. The issue started when one of the guards, we'll call him Roy, started talking about how his friend who worked at the sister site and all of his fellow guards had received raises because they were short-staffed, and the company wanted to thank them for working extra hours. This information made many of the guards very angry. We were much worse off with our staff, and we worked at the world headquarters, yet none of us had even been suggested for raises. This led to the guards being particularly unmotivated and refusing to pick up shifts. So one of the senior guards decided to call the business manager and complain, asking why the sister site would get raises and why we would not. Apparently, it was more of a rant than an actual conversation, but at the end of it, he promised he would look into getting our raises and that he would speak with the regional manager to get the process started. When word of this reached the facility, it was one of the only things everyone could talk about. We would discuss how excited everyone was to get raises, and the business manager had also promised that we would be getting new guards to help out. So no more 60-plus hour work weeks. Everything was happy in our world for about 48 hours. When I arrived at work early morning on Thursday, I saw an email addressed to all the security guards with our business manager copied in it. He never gets copied in emails. The email said this: "Hello. As you all are aware, all of the rumors that have been brought to my attention have been addressed. I would like to take this time and remind everyone not to engage in this activity again. Moving forward, bring all concerns to the attention of your immediate supervisor so they may be addressed. Spreading rumors and causing panic will be looked at as creating an uncomfortable, hostile work environment. Disciplinary action will be taken. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns about the matter. Also, make sure that your attention while on site is on our purpose. We should all be focused on the objective of providing the client with outstanding service." We were extremely upset. Basically, we were being told that we weren't getting raises, and the business manager claimed that the sister site getting raises was nothing but a rumor. Roy was berated for supposedly causing a panic, and since the senior guard was the one who went over the supervisor and straight to the business manager, he was being told his job was potentially on the line. Everyone was absolutely appalled, and one of the older guards quit on the spot. The company had basically flat out lied and made promises they had no intention of keeping, and we legally couldn't prove anything. And thus, the revenge begins. We had the phone numbers to the sister site in the directory, but didn't know who the supervisor was over there. I asked Roy who his friend that had worked there was, and if I could get into contact with him. Unfortunately, he had quit and joined the Air Force just days prior. At this point, I felt stuck, but I didn't want anyone to be mistreated by a company just because we were the little people. So I stuck my neck out and, using the phone in my office, called the client of the sister site. The operator picked up, and I explained that I'm a guard at the headquarters and needed to speak with the supervisor of their site. The operator gladly put me through. Frank answered the phone, and I explained who I am and why I was calling. I didn't beat around the bush with him and just flat out asked the big question: did their site get raises? They did, and then some. It turns out not only did all their guards get raises, including himself, but they also received bonus checks for their hard work. I could barely speak. I couldn't tell if I was furious at how we had been treated or how thankful I was that Roy and the senior guard weren't lying. I asked Frank very calmly, "Can I get that in writing?" The next morning, I asked for a meeting with the business manager, the site supervisor, the client, and the 3 guards who were willing to show up. Myself, Roy, the senior guard, and a random guard who was willing to be present. He was in the loop most of the time. The business manager was annoyed by this meeting and demanded to know what was going on. The senior guard and I explained how we were there to address how employees were lied to and how we were being threatened because we wanted to be compensated just as much as the sister site. On top of that, we stated that all 4 of us would leave if this issue was not addressed. The client asked, "What are they talking about?" "We have made it clear that the rumors have been addressed and that no such promises were made. This meeting is over," the business manager clarified. I then said, "Not so fast, sir. There is one other person who would like to speak with you." And in walks the knight in shining armor, Frank. We watched in amusement as all the color drained from the business manager's face. He stood there completely still, not making a sound. Frank smiled in an almost predatory fashion as he knew the confrontation he was about to partake in. The client asked, "Who is this?" "I'm Frank. I am the site supervisor for your other site. I have here documentation that not only did the business manager lie about my guards getting raises, but also a recorded phone call, as all calls from company phones are monitored, that has the business manager on record stating that he was going to pursue seeking a raise for this site's guards." At this point, even I was speechless. I didn't know how he got a copy of the phone call between the senior guard and the business manager, but he did and was holding the transcript. The client went from confused to angry, glaring at the business manager. He was still standing there, white as a ghost, and now our site supervisor was staring at him in what looked like pure rage, mostly because he took the flak for his lies. The business manager asked, "How did you?" The client interrupted, "You're right, this meeting is over, for you. Get out of my office." The business manager glanced at me and the senior guard in what looked like pure defeat and moped out of the office. "Can I see what you have?" the client asked Frank. Frank handed over all the evidence, and the client looked through it for about 5 minutes. He finished going over it, closed the booklet, and looked over at the site supervisor. "Did you know about this?" The site supervisor explained how he was simply doing what he was told and not to ask questions. He was ex-military, so that mindset was believable. After this, the client instructed all of us to go home and told us we would be given money for the shifts we were supposed to work, but instructed us to come back at 7 a.m. sharp the next morning and to meet in the conference room. We all showed up the next day and were greeted by the client and another younger lady who he explained to us was the financial manager of the whole company. The business manager was also sitting there, but on the other side of the conference table. We sat down, and she started off by apologizing for the behavior of the business manager and explained how they did not like this sort of thing. However, since he was a contractor, they could not legally hold him accountable. The business manager seemed somewhat relieved by this, and my heart admittedly sank. She said we could file reports against him, and they would confirm them, but they could not partake in any form beyond that. Then, the financial manager gave the big but. She said her offer was that we could work for the client personally as in-house security and not as contractors. They said they would hire all 4 of us on the spot, and we could start working tomorrow. This included full benefits, a huge increase in pay over $20 an hour, and 6 weeks of vacation time a year. However, the offer only stood while we were in the room. The business manager was fuming as he had just lost 4 guards. Of course, we all accepted. She made it clear, however, that we weren't hired until the meeting was over. Then the financial manager's attention turned to the business manager. She explained that since 4 guards had just quit, he was now in severe violation of the contract due to lack of staff, and that they were using the break clause to terminate the account, effective immediately. The business manager tried to argue, saying that stealing contractors with the intent of using a break clause in a contract is illegal, which it is. Her response was something like this. "Financial manager, you are correct, which is why these men are not currently employed by us. They left on their own accord and are unemployed. Since this is a severe violation of the contract, we will be dealing with this here and now." The business manager was speechless at the perfectly deceptive and well-played loophole that the client company had just exploited. He was also told that if they did decide to pursue a lawsuit, they would be allowed to legally bring the evidence of the contractor company's deception and blatant lies to its employees. The client and the financial manager spent the next 4 hours taking phone calls, and we couldn't leave the room. After they hung up the phone for the last time, the client turned to the business manager and explained calmly but firmly, "Please step outside with me for a moment." He also gestured for me and the senior guard to stand up and follow them. We walked outside, and the client smiled. "Would you please, as my security officers, escort the business manager off-site? His company is no longer associated with us." We gladly escorted him to his car. 3 years after this happened, all 4 of us still work there. We heard from another guard that the business manager was fired basically as soon as he got back to his company's headquarters, and Frank was offered his position. He apparently responded by handing them his resignation letter. He went on to move to another security company overseas. Last I knew, he had been in France for almost a year. Our site supervisor was moved to another facility, but still works for the company, last I checked. We love working for the client, and all 4 of us became good friends. We all work similar shifts, so every Friday after work, we all go to the bar and have a good time. We also became fairly close to the client, so he invites us over to his house for special occasions. And yes, the security director for a petrochemical company has it big. Thanks to my job, however, I was able to save my relationship, take great vacations, buy a brand new at the time Chevy Silverado, and buy an actual house. So, to sum things up, don't mess with the security guard.